Today, on my first concert.
But for Kevin, it was kind of like meeting the Pope, maybe like meeting Dave Lee for somebody who enjoys radio voices. It was almost a surreal experience, I will tell you, and one that I've never forgotten, never will forget, because of what he means to, in the context of modern day times, I guess, specifically with coaching as well in basketball.
Welcome back, everybody. Dave Lee here with Davide Rosso, our producer on My First Concert. A very special show today, brought to you, of course, by our good friends at AquariusHomeservices.com, here from the AquariusHomeservices.com studios, and by Minnesota friends for many, many years at StarBank.net. In fact, a lot of you already know them, I'm sure, but we'll tell you more about them later. We're grateful that they're sponsoring the show. And really excited today. I've got two guys that I've known for a while and been a fan of Bob Martin's. He played basketball back with the Gophers and the Apple Valley native, and on to the NBA after that. Brad Madson, longtime fixture with the Minnesota Vikings. And they're both kind enough to join us today. And Bob, appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, I'm excited about this. I love music. I don't play any instruments. I can't sing real well, at least outside of the shower in my vehicle, but I enjoy music and happy to be here.
And Brad, good to see you again. Thanks for coming back.
Oh, my pleasure. I love the podcast, Dave. It's always fun. I always tell all my friends about it. You have just such an eclectic group of friends that do it.
Well, it's fun. And Davide and I have a little surprise we may pop on you here in a little while after when a certain subject comes up. But Bob, I want to start with you today. Now, obviously, the title of the show is My First Concert. And the interesting part of this program, Bob, is that whenever you mention My First Concert, even people that aren't huge rock and roll fans or music fans, inevitably, at some point, they'll start remembering who they saw, who they went with. It's amazing how this particular event stays in our minds, and most times in a really good way. So in your case, Bob, as a big music guy, what was the first one you went to?
Well, if I can overlook the Johnny Home Band at Valley Fair a handful of times when I was probably a pre-teenager and going to have some fun at Valley Fair and actually catching, with my own level of entertainment, Johnny Home. The first concert I went to was September of 1989, sophomore year of college. I went with a good friend, Kevin Lynch, and we as a tandem went and saw the Debbie Gibson version of her Electric Youth Tour. And again, that was the fall of that would have been my sophomore year of college. Just kind of on a whim, we said, hey, let's go do this. So we bought tickets and had a little bit of a soft place in our heart, I guess, for Debbie Gibson at the time, as a lot of teenagers or young 20s did, and had a good time. But that was my first official concert, and I've been razzed about it ever since by some friends that saw us there, but they were there as well, so all good.
Well, now you can razz the guy sitting next to you, because I believe, Bradley, I can mention that you hit on Debbie Gibson.
I did. Swing and a miss. But she was in town to do Funny Girl, and she was making an appearance out at Planet Hollywood out at the Mall of America, and Molly Mulvihill Steinke, knew I was a fan and invited me out there. So I brought some Vikings gear, a jersey, and some hats and stuff, and had the little meet and greet. And she was really nice. Said, hey, I'd love to have you to come to the play, and I'll get you 4 tickets. Okay, great. So I was in the locker room talking about, and Jeff Brady, who was the star middle linebacker, total character, goes, you think you can win Debbie Gibson over with a couple toboggan hats? And he didn't say stock, he was from Kentucky, he said toboggan hats. I said, okay, buddy, I got tickets, you bring your wife down and we'll go to the play and then meet her afterwards. So we go to the play. She was amazing and really dynamic. And then Brady actually fell asleep during the play, not much of a culture guy. But so then we go backstage afterwards, just Jeff and me. And I told them, this is before cell phones, and I had an Instamatic camera, but I gave it to Jeff, and I said, look, I don't want to say, hey, can I get a picture with you, Debbie? I want you to act like it's your camera, and you want to get a picture with Debbie and me. And I said, you got one job to do, okay? You say, hey, can I get a picture with you guys? And then so we go down there, and and Debbie has a boyfriend. There's another blow. Ooh, oh, I want you to meet my boyfriend. Oh, great, Mr. Wonderful. He was a soap opera star that I'd never heard of. But at any rate, so Brady goes, hey, let me get a photo with you guys. And then so soapbox guy, hops in there, and so it's like three people in the photo, and Jeff Brady goes, no, you get out of there. And then so I did get the photo with Debbie and me, so I can lie. The photo turned out great. Makes it I can lie and act like we were friends. But she was really cool. Did you ever meet her, Dave, at all?
Well, no, because I knew that story, and I knew everything after that would just be a letdown for her. So I didn't want to put myself in that. No. But Bob, what's interesting is you mentioned Debbie Gibson and Davide. Are you going to work with Debbie Gibson, or did you work with Debbie Gibson?
I did work with her.
Oh my goodness!
Wow. So, in the studio you guys are sitting is partly owned or occupied by St. Paul Peterson.
Oh, sure.
And St. Paul Peterson used to be Debbie Gibson's MD back in the 90s or early 2000s. And so last year, when Debbie was here in town, they did all the rehearsals here in Studio A. Oh. And so I was the assisting engineer of that rehearsal. So I set them up. I was here with them for a couple of days. And then I actually saw Debbie a couple of weeks ago at NAMM in LA with Paul. And so I said hi again. And
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Very
great.
Cool.
Was she nice to work with?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And she's fantastic. They had really great rehearsals. And I think their first show of that tour was here in Minneapolis. That's why they did. Wow. The rehearsals here.
Did she ask about Brad or Bob at all? Or?
I mentioned the Brad, but she knew so many Brads, so sorry.
yeah, darn it.
That's awesome.
So, Bob, let's talk a little bit about your experience out there in LA, because when you were playing in the NBA, and this is just, I'm straying from music for one quick second, but you had a chance to sit down with John Wooden?
So this one happened after I had a couple of cups of coffee in the NBA. It wasn't anything long, but going back to the John Wooden thing, I will give a little backstory. Bill Walton, who played at UCLA, played for the legendary coach John Wooden at UCLA. I had connected with Bill Walton back in 1999. I sent him an email just through his website, and of course, I sent him one probably 2 months ago. I send him one a couple times a year, once a year maybe, just to kind of check in. And of course, he does his hippie, things are great, life is good, blah blah blah. But a really interesting guy, Bill Walton is. Kevin, who I already mentioned, Kevin Lynch, and I went out to LA, knowing that we would probably have a run-in with Bill Walton, because I had emailed him saying, hey, we're going to be out there. I'm out there with a college buddy. This is 5 or 6 years after I had played out there. And of course, he was the color commentator for the team. So I'd see him in the locker room and before games and after games and whatnot. So he didn't know me, but he may have remembered who I was possibly after I made a couple references. Anyway, so we get out there, and we're driving around for a couple of days, and we go to meet Bill Walton. He says, just come on up to the door, knock 3 times, it'll be unlocked, come on in. He ends up taking us to lunch, and just a character. Bill Walton, as you probably know, just from whatever experience you had or know of him, just a character. But Kevin said, we got to talking at lunch about John Wooden. And he says, I talk to John Wooden every day. He's such a great man, great coach as well. And he said, I think Kevin may have asked, is he doing okay? It would be cool to connect with him. And so he says, here's the deal. Here's his phone number. Here's Coach Wooden's number. You want to call him, start leaving a message. He's not going to answer his phone. So, of course, we follow Bill's instructions after lunch, and we call and say, hey, a couple of guys, college basketball, NBA a little bit, yada, yada, yada. We're in town for a short amount of time. We're in LA right now. It would be an amazing experience, at least for us, hopefully for him, to have the opportunity to have a conversation. And of course, we're just a couple of, nut jobs from the Midwest. Well, John Wooden picks up the phone and says, hello. And of course, he's, 84, 85 years old, something like that at the time. We end up connecting with him. He says, yeah, come over 1 o'clock tomorrow or 1:30 the next day. Kevin and I had the opportunity, and obviously we took it, for 3.5 hours to sit in the condo that was John Wooden had lived in, I believe, since 1973, and it probably hadn't been redecorated since 1973. Green shag carpet, all kinds of cool stuff. We have a great picture with him as well, with John in the middle, and then Kevin and I on either side flanking John Wooden. But just hearing his stories, we didn't talk much about music. We talked about poetry, and which he was a big fan of poetry and had just an amazing mind for life beyond basketball, and certainly within the context of basketball, he was a master. But certainly he's got a lot of life principles that apply to anyone, regardless of sport or non-sport. But for Kevin, it was kind of like meeting the Pope, maybe like meeting Dave Lee for somebody who enjoys radio voices. It was almost a surreal experience, I will tell you, and one that I've never forgotten, never will forget, because of what he means to, in the context of modern day times, I guess, specifically with coaching as well in basketball.
It's interesting that Bobby mentioned poetry, because I know Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was into poetry, and I wonder if he got that partially from John Wooden's love of poetry.
He very well may have. I don't remember the specifics. We didn't. He may have mentioned something, but Swen Nader, I think Kevin's actually got at where he lives.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin's got something tagged onto the wall, a poem that Swen Nader, of course, who played at UCLA and in the NBA, wrote. Maybe about John Wooden. I forget exactly what it was, but yeah, he had a big fondness for poetry and obviously just life in general. But yeah, a great experience, and just fun to see his little condo where he lived for, at that point, 25, 26, 27 years. I think it was 2000 when we were out there. So
yeah, one thing to meet him and then sit in his condo that long. Wow, what an experience. And I mentioned Bill Walton for a reason, because as you know, Bob, you're a big music guy. And Bill Walton was a big music guy. He was really a Deadhead, wasn't he, for the Grateful Dead? I mean, he was really into them, as I recall.
Yeah, I think he probably still is. Now, he was a friend of Jerry Garcia, and I don't know how close they were. Of course, Jerry's been dead for 20-some years, but Bill shared some stories among them about the Grateful Dead. And of course, if you look at his website, I haven't looked at it for a while, but he is a well-known, probably one of the better known, if not the best known, kind of Deadhead, for better or for worse. But Bill's an interesting character for sure.
We're talking with Bob Martin and Brad Madson here on My First Concert. Dave, here you can link up to Spotify, to Apple, to TalkNorth.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you subscribe and get these each week. It's always fun for us. Today's another great example of why these are fun to listen to. And I want to say thank you to the folks over at Star Bank for making it possible. So if you're expanding business this time of year, or doing little repairs at your house, or maybe looking for a new house, or whatever it is, that turnaround time on a loan with Star Bank, a Minnesota company, really second to none. There's not a lot of red tape. There's no monkey business. Once you apply for a loan and submit your documentation, away you go. So if it is that home equity line of credit, if it's a home mortgage, if it's a business loan, ag operating, which is kind of how they started many years ago here in the state, or equipment loan, whatever, maybe an RV if you're thinking about that. They handle everything. And of course, they are a Minnesota company started by the same family many years ago. Now they have a number of locations throughout Minnesota, including the Metro. So I just encourage you to get your loan needs met at Star Bank. You're going to like them. They're going to remember you. You're going to remember them. If it's digital technology you want to deal with, like we all do, obviously, they have all of that. But I got to tell you, they really are good at customer service. So if you can make it in person or just give them a phone call, they'll answer that phone. Loans are subject to a loan application and approval. Starbank.net. Really good people, member FDIC, and equal housing lender. Hey, Bob and Brad Madson are with us. Bob, if we talk about the most memorable concert for you, is there one that stands out above the others?
Yes. I was thinking of a few. Certainly one I will share, which you may be familiar with, being friends with Kevin, is June of 1998, June 12th of 98 specifically. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page were in town, of course, the two of the four of Led Zeppelin. And they were doing a tour, and Kevin had the great idea of like, hey, let's go to this concert in a couple months. So we bought tickets, and my sister had a little sign making shop, making T-shirts and coffee mugs with logos and whatnot in there. So he said, hey, why don't you see if your sister would put together 2 T-shirts, and we had Richard Cole Fan Club on the front of the shirt. And of course, if you know music or Led Zeppelin, Richard Cole was their their tour manager, and had kind of a shady background, to say the least, with what he provided for the guys, or kind of line things up. I won't get into specifics there. Kevin knows more about it than I do. But Richard Cole Fan Club, and then the Swan Song thing. And we had him put on. I'm 7 feet tall, Kevin 6'5", and my sister said, "Well, what size do you want?" And I think we both said like a boy's medium. So we wore these things like skin tight. So we're looking like we're all big old 30-year-old guys. Anyway, so we get to the concert early. We're walking around looking at people, just kind of taking it in, and people are saying, "Oh man, cool shirts. Where did you get those things?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, down over there by section 112. They're $50 or something." Of course, we had them made, and there were the only 2 that on the planet. So as I fast forward with that as the context, we have these white shirts, black bold print, which Richard Cole Fan Club on the front. Halfway or so through the concert, they are between songs, and all the lights in the stadium kind of go on, and of course people are holding up their phones or lighters and kind of doing that stuff. But the lights go on, and Robert Plant, and it's relevant, I guess. We're probably 25 feet from the stage, give or take, not very far. Certainly on pretty good seats off to the side. Jimmy Page is in the back, kind of tightening his guitar strings or doing whatever a guitarist might do mid-concert. Robert Plant, and he kind of takes his right hand over his eyebrows to kind of shade his eyes from the light, and he kind of pans from left over to the right. And of course, we happen to be seated over to the right. And of course, we weren't seated at this time. We were standing up, a couple of relatively tall guys among a relatively short crowd. And as he gets over by us, we're not too far away. We're jumping around, kind of trying to get his attention. And he sees us. We get a thumbs up and a nod. And there was no mistaking that he was looking at us. He saw the shirts. He read the Richard Cole Fan Club and thinks, "Who are these clowns?" Anyway, so he goes over to Jimmy Page, who happens to be fiddling with his guitar strings, and kind of whispers something to him. Of course, it's loud in the arena and whatnot, like play the next song and whatnot. And they both look at us and kind of smile and nod. And Kevin and I are thinking, hey, this is going to be great. Maybe they'll have Richard Cole or some current tour manager come over and take us backstage, and we'll meet the band and do whatever you do when you meet the band, I suppose. That didn't happen. But that was the highlight of the night, highlight of probably my musical experiences of listening and experiencing music, live music for sure. But a great thing, and I still carry the ticket stub for that concert in my wallet. I've had it in there since that night, and it's been there. I've changed wallets a handful of times, but I keep moving it from one wallet to the next.
Wow.
Well, and we all wanted to see Led Zeppelin. Many didn't get to see them, but then to see those 2 guys and then have them, just to be there for the first, no matter where you sat, but to have them notice you and just recognize you, give you a thumbs up. That's pretty cool. Maybe not. John Wooden's cool, but this is pretty cool too.
Yeah, no, I had kind of helped facilitate getting Led Zeppelin into Kevin's periphery back in college. So my sister got me into them back in like middle school, early high school, and of course they were relevant for 15, 20 years before that. So I started listening to them, and she had the albums and some CDs and whatnot, and I started listening to them as well. And at some point, got Kevin into them. I'm not taking credit for that or the blame for that matter, but he certainly has taken a liking to their music, and this is 30 plus years ago. So it's like, it just seems like a couple lifetimes ago at this point in life. But certainly one of my all-time favorite bands as well with their music.
You mentioned Johnny Home Band at the start out at Valley Fair, and I think all of us saw Johnny somewhere or another. And it made me think of his guitar player, vision impaired, but Billy Shearer, who listens to this podcast, was Johnny's guitar player. Okay. And then Billy plays with the Fabulous Armadillos, and he's talented, but he did a whole lot of love. And you made me think of this, Bob, but he did a whole lot of love one time over at the Ames Center. And I turned to my wife and said, I know this is sacrilege, but I said, that's as good as Robert Plant did a whole lot of love. He's just amazing. Someday I'm going to get a hold of you guys. We're going to have to go see Billy and whoever he's performing with and have him do that, at least a Led Zeppelin song. That's a hard band to cover, but he was impressive. But of course, you saw him at Valley Fair a long time ago. So shout out to Billy, who I know is listening out there. Okay, other concerts along the way, Bob, that stand out. I know Bryan Adams is one of those.
Yeah, Bryan Adams. Real briefly on that, they had we bought tickets. We were 100 and some feet from the stage, essentially at one end of the Tigert Center, and the stage was at the other side. Of course, halfway through the concert, they said, "Hey, we'll be right back," and you're waiting for a little bit, and a little bit maybe being 8-10 minutes. Well, there was a small stage, what turned out to be a stage, maybe 10 feet or less in front of us, and they were piddling with something. They take off this tarp, and all of a sudden it turns out to be a stage. Bryan Adams and the guys on the stage end up playing 4 or 5 songs. And of course the people in front of us kind of crushed forward, and because we were being pushed from the back, so we go from 10 feet away to about 3 inches away from the thing, and we're fangirling these Bryan Adams and whatnot. But that was pretty memorable, for sure as well. And those are bigger experiences. I have a couple. I went and saw Bruce Springsteen a couple of times with a former roommate who was in the music industry, and we had passes where we were down on the floor, in front of the front row, but below the stage. Just an incredible thing. Clarence Clemens was there, but just seeing Bruce Springsteen was kind of a cool experience, because of his relevance with music. And maybe some people don't care for him a whole lot. Certainly a lot of people love his music and whatnot. So Bruce Springsteen is another memorable one, and just seeing him up close, literally pretty up close, where you're 10, 15 feet away, depending on where you're standing. And I, of course, happened to be standing just off to the side of Dan Wilson from Semisonic. He happened to be there, right there, and I knew who he was, recognized him.
That was my best friend, in 3rd and 4th grade at Fernhill.
Oh, really?
Dan Wilson, yes.
And so closing time, and
he just won another Grammy for songwriting.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Just super smart guy, great guy.
Yeah, but no, that was another mini highlight. And I will say, this is not within the context, but of seeing a musical band, at least performing. But as a kid, I used to buy Kiss cards. Of course, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, those guys.
Oh yeah.
And you have a couple of cards, you got some duplicates, and you put them in your bike with a clothespin. And of course, it sounds like your bike is a motorcycle.
Yeah.
At least when you're 7 years old. So I've had the chance twice to meet. I think Davide, you mentioned meeting Debbie Gibson for at least a second time. Meeting at Sam Goody at the Mall of America shortly after it opened. Kiss was at Sam Goody. And I went through with a buddy, and of course we, stalked the, not the whole band was there, but Gene Simmons was there, and we ended up running into him at the airport, looking for him. That was our intent of going over there. So we parked the car with a different buddy. And then when the movie Rockstar came out, I happened to be out in LA. I think I may have been with Kevin, and a roommate that I lived with when I was out there. And Gene Simmons was on the red carpet. And I ended up saying, hey, just talking to him. And I said, oh, I met you, 6 years ago. And he's like, how you doing? And what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a student. And he says, oh, what are you studying? I said, well, I'm a student of life. And he's like, well, good for you. And anyway, so he didn't stick his tongue out, didn't do anything, didn't violate me in any way. But Gene Simmons is obviously iconic in my lifetime as far as rock and roll singers go. And that was memorable. But no autographs, no pictures, anything like that. It was before selfies and cell phones were relevant, at least in my possession.
He's pretty big. And
pretty big. He had 8-inch heels on. Or
platform,
maybe that. So, yeah. But not quite as tall as you might think.
The Rockstar movie made me think of that too, because I think unofficially, I don't think it was endorsed, but wasn't it kind of the story of Judas Priest?
That I don't know.
It kind of was it.
Was it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it never mentioned that. But
you can put it two and two together. Single leaves, singer is gay, metal band, and it was right after. It was right after they quit. So they.
And they got a cover band singer to come in and sing, didn't they?
Exactly.
For Rob Halford at one time. I'm not sure.
There's another fun story about that movie. Just quick. Sure. Miles Kennedy, who sings with Slash in Slash's band, he was the second guy that came on in lieu of Mark Wahlberg.
Okay.
The guy who was singing again like Mark Wahlberg's character. That was Miles Kennedy.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't know that. So that was a fun fact.
Interesting.
Yeah, I did not know that. And Brad, through the years, you must have met a few bands just because of your affiliation with the Vikings and stuff. Did you ever run into any of that stuff?
I ran into quite a few. I was thinking of one was Bob's talking about getting up close with Springsteen and stuff. It was the Starkey Hearing Foundation, and John Mellencamp played in it, and Bill Austin had set up Mellencamp's dad with hearing aids. So Mellencamp came in and played the fundraiser, and we got it's a bunch of 50, 60 business people, not your typical crowd form. But of course, me being super fan, we got up towards the front, and he's playing, sounds great. And I just remember I'm looking at his hands when he's playing guitar, and he had so much dirt under his fingernails. It's just like that's what I remember the most. And then people were reaching up to get their hands slapped. I thought, oh, what the heck? So I got Lord knows how many germs I got off of that. But that was a good one. Yeah.
Well, that's small town guys, right? They're digging in the dirt, and
yeah.
That's what small town guys do. Hey, we're talking with Bob Martin and Brad Madson. Nice to have you along here on My First Concert. Nice to have the folks at Aquarius Home Services. And, we're, I don't know if we've gone through winter much this year, but it's getting a little bit chillier out there again. So brace yourself for some good news that'll warm your heart. It is really a perfect time to bid farewell to that old tired furnace and AC. It's been working hard for you for a long time. You can dive into that cozy embrace of a brand new high efficiency whole home heating and cooling system from Aquarius. That's what I did. And now picture this, you can have it installed now, and guess what? You won't have to pay a penny until next year. So that's a big deal. You're right, not a single payment until 2025. So head over to AquariusHomeservices.com. Schedule your free comfort estimate. Financing offers are subject to credit approval. Trust Aquarius to be your cozy home companion, ensuring you stay warm and delighted all through 2024 as well. But they really do believe in earning the right to be recommended, and they do. And I've worked with them, as I've mentioned many times before, well over 2 decades since Jeff started the company. They're just a click away at AquariusHomeservices.com. Okay, so we're talking with Bob and Brad here today on My First Concert. And Bob, you've seen a lot of acts. You're like Kevin, you were mentioning Kevin, you guys went together to a lot of shows, but you went to a ton. So among some of the others that kind of stand out for you, what are those?
Back in 2009, I went out and bought tickets. A couple of things I'll mention. Went out and bought tickets for Michael Johnson, who I believe is from Minnesota. He's passed away,
Minnetonka.
but he sang Bluer Than Blue and This Life Won't Last Forever. And I always had like a little soft spot for a lot of 70s kind of easy listening music. So that was at the Apple Valley Zoo, the Minnesota Zoo in Apple Valley, the amphitheater outside. So that was a really cool, fun experience just to be out there, intimate environment. Would be one. A couple other ones, I called into a radio show. It was probably like WLTE on some little call-in thing. I'm probably at home by myself back in the day, 15 years ago. And there was a gal named Janice Ian who wrote and performed some songs. And of course, the only one that I really knew was At 17. Maybe a lot of people might know, or they might say, what is this At 17? So if you Google it, it may ring a bell, but it's from probably the mid 70s. And I called in, I won 2 tickets. And so I went to some little theater over in St. Paul and just went and experienced her and a guy sitting on stage telling stories, spinning yarns about things in yesteryear and how songs came into their, came to their mind and how they put them, put it on paper and all that, and ultimately produced in a hit or a series of hits, only one of which I actually knew. But it was kind of it took me back, winning that ticket and hearing the song and performed live by the person who performed it on the radio when I heard it, and maybe have written it. I don't recall specifically there. But yeah, Janice Ian at 17. And then one other experience, I mentioned a roommate that had, his former brother-in-law, that had been in the music business for a long time. He wasn't a performer. Like, he played the guitar or keyboard a little bit, but he did not act in a band. He just, worked for Sony or BMG or something like that. But he would get tickets to shows. And he said, "Hey, would you like to go see Five for Fighting? It's at the new Guthrie." This is probably a dozen years ago, maybe 13, 14 years ago. And I said, "Yeah, I know, 100 Years and Superman and a couple other songs." Of course, they're still relevant, but and I still listen to some of their music. So we went and saw John Andrasik, I forget what it is. And I believe Five for Fighting, if I remember correctly, is basically him. And then he just gets he effectively got four other people. They weren't a band. It was him and four other people that played instruments. But it wasn't always the same four people on one tour to the next, like, Page and Plant and Bonham and John Paul Jones would be for Led Zeppelin. But the gal that opened for him, Chantal Kreviatsik was her name. Never heard of her before. She had a couple of songs that said, "Oh, this is kind of good." But I really like the intimate environment. Maybe it's 1,000 people or so. I'm not sure what the new Guthrie holds in downtown Minneapolis. But we had decent seats. Of course, there's probably not really a bad seat in there because they're all pretty close to the stage and they're all it's in a semicircle or an arc. And then the performer on stage is essentially, by obvious reasons, the focal point of all the seats. They both independently, Chantal Kreviatsik before, warmed up for John Andrasik. But they would tell stories. And I really, especially in an intimate environment like that, it was really fun to hear some of the backstory on how a song came to be, some of the things or different thoughts, their experiences that may not tie directly into why a song was written, but about their, from what I can recall growing up. So just kind of, feel like you get to know these people. And of course, as human condition is, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I want to hear more of their songs. So for the next, couple of weeks or certainly the next few days, it's like you want to pursue those songs because they're relevant, and it seems like you have a little bit of a connection with the group or the performer. I don't know if that's just me or if that's kind of everyone, like I said, the human condition. But those are a few experiences that, they weren't big venues. They weren't huge names, specifically like a Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or Metallica or something like that. But equally, they were fun experiences, and they were music that I knew. And certainly I enjoy music that is original that I don't know. I just, don't get out as much these days as I once did, I guess.
Well, but I think that, I think you've hit a chord with a lot of people. Brad, let me ask you about, we had a conversation with you and Mary Tan, our good friend who was on the show a long time ago. And one of the things of the Super Bowl, of course, is the NFL brings in acts. And we still have that great story about when Sid Hartman met Prince with our buddy Bob Hagan at the Super Bowl. And we'll save that for another time. But let's talk about Mary and the Taylor Swift story.
Well, when we did your podcast a couple years ago, and you asked if you could have anybody perform a concert for you, who would it be? I picked Rick Springfield,
and I'll be asking
you
that, Bob, in a minute, so heads up.
Sure.
And Mary picked Taylor Swift, and Mary, of course, has Whisker Media as her company, and she's a cat lover. And she said, I'd pick Taylor Swift because she has cats, and one of which is a Scottish fold cat named Olivia Benson. Okay, so interesting, she's got a couple other cats. Well, Olivia's been in some of her commercials and her videos. So I Googled this cat just because I know I was coming in. And the cat is worth, reportedly, according to Wikipedia, her Wikipedia page, $97 million. And Travis Kelce is only worth $40 million. So it's kind of interesting.
It sure is. Bob, let's bring up that Brad just mentioned. If you could have, before I ask you that about your three shows that you would set up, you've got some other concerts you want to share some stories about?
Nothing that's popping into my head. I saw ZZ Top. That was a quick one where Kevin Lynch and I, after practice one day, he says, "Hey, ZZ Top's in town." This is back in 1990 or 91. We're going to go to the show tonight. Rob and I are looking at going to the show. Another teammate of ours, Rob Rowe, I believe it was, or may have been Travis Clampy, a team manager. Anyway, so they invited me or asked if I wanted to go, and I said, "Well, yeah." Do you guys have tickets? They said, well, no, let's go down there and see if we can get them. So of course we clean up and get down, have a meal, and we get down to the Target Center, and lo and behold, there's a little line at the ticket window, and so it's like, okay, let's get in line. We didn't want to buy necessarily from a scalper out front, whatnot, and we get up there, up to the window, and of course, can I help you? And there's three of us. Like, yeah, we're looking for some tickets. What do you have? And they take out these tickets, and it's X amount of dollars, and it's like, is there anything better? We didn't want to sit too far away. It's like if you're there, it's like you can hear the music on the radio. I want to be part of the experience where be it a little closer.
Yes.
And the show was about to start. I mean, maybe the warm-up act is already on there, and ZZ Top is probably warming up their vocal cords in the back. And the ticket person says, well, I do have these tickets. And they kind of go to a little area in their little thing in front of them, and that a promoter had set aside, but they haven't accounted for them. So it's after whatever, 7:00. I can sell them to you. I don't remember the price, but they ended up being fifth row tickets for ZZ Top, and pretty much in the center, promoter tickets that we'd stumbled into. And so it's like, we'll take them. And it was like the fifth row may have been the second row, because people push forward a little bit, and we're tall, so it's not like we have some of the burden of looking at the the bald spots like on the back of my head or something like that. So yeah, that was a pretty cool thing. Obviously, hearing the relevance of ZZ Top, and after they were just probably past the peak. This is the early '90s at the very latest. Still very relevant, and that was a pretty memorable experience to have a chance to see them and the big beards and whatnot, and be part of that experience. I don't remember the name of the tour. But, Sharp Dressed Man.
They were such an iconic band, because MTV, I think, had a lot to do with that. But geez, Bob, I remember you made me think of a concert I saw them. It was supposed to be outside, and it had rained so much that they moved it inside to a pavilion at a state fair, and not the Minnesota State Fair, another state. Anyway, we get in there, and the humidity is it's dripping off the ceiling. I mean, it's hot. But the place is packed. When we get in there, band starts, ZZ Top goes 3 songs, and I believe it was Billy Gibbons claps to the floor from the heat exhaustion.
Oh,
I mean, just boom, down. So we think, this is part of the act. And we're all waiting for more, but then they rush them off, and they come out and cancel the concert. Sorry, that's, and of course, first thing we're thinking is, well, hope Billy's okay. Second thing we're thinking, because we're all broke, we have, we spent everything we had to get to this concert. We're going to get a refund. Yeah, sorry, no refunds. That was my first, one of my first ZZ Top experiences. Although I saw them recently at Mystic Lake, and they were, obviously 2 of them are left, but it was just fantastic. So yeah, they get the crowd going, don't they?
Yeah, and I think of a couple other ones, not necessarily great seats or great standing places, but Stone Temple Pilots at the Roy Wilkins Auditorium back one of their last concerts, because Scott Weiland, the singer, had OD'd not too long after that, I believe. So STP was a fun experience. I saw, who was it? Went to a few years ago to see Social Distortion, who I didn't know more than probably one of their songs, but they had, it was just kind of a great environment, and knowing a little bit more about the lead singer, who I think had kind of a rough background and kind of cleaned up his act the last decade or so, is what I recall hearing. But yeah, Social Distortion at the Armory, and then the Kings of Leon probably 15 years ago at the Armory was pretty entertaining. They were kind of on the upswing of their several years of getting close to being fairly dominant on a national level, hearing some of their tunes and enjoying that experience as well. Again, the seats weren't necessarily the best. We were standing, but it was just fun to be in that environment with a bunch of people. You're maybe 10 feet away from the mosh pit. It's like, I don't want to be in the middle of that thing. I don't need to be crowd surfing. I don't want to be slammed to the ground, things like that. I don't need to be danced. I'll just kind of stand over here with the person I'm with and avoid, either getting swung at or having a beer bottle or a Solo cups, flying at my face or something like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and once you had a taste of good seats, after that, if you don't get a good seat, it's kind of it's frustrating. Brad, the best show you've ever seen, what is it?
Well, you know what? I think I'll go for entertainment value that and maybe not a superstar, but at the time, Ricky Martin had the hit "Livin' the Vida Loca," and it was funny because Chris Carter came to me, and this is when probably around 2099, and he said, "Can you try and get me some tickets for Ricky Martin?" Because my daughter, Chris Carter, wide
player.
receiver, Hall of Famer. And he had like a 8 or 10-year-old daughter that wanted to go. So of course, again, community relations guy shoehorns himself into we need 4 tickets, not just 2. So we're there, and about the 3rd or 4th song in, he plays "Livin' the Vida Loca." I mean, it's just a great showman. But then after that's done, Chris Carter says to me, "Well, after that one, I'm done." Meaning he didn't know any other songs, and neither did I. But showmanship-wise, the guy was really good.
Yeah, entertainer. Okay, so Bob, you got to put together a concert. You can have 3 acts. Who do you put on stage?
Well, I'd have to
live or not.
I probably the first one I'd pick, and probably the last one I would want to perform, just to end on the highest of notes, would be Led Zeppelin in their prime. You did say alive or not. I would love to see Led Zeppelin from 72 or 74 or 69 or whatever. Classic Led Zeppelin with all their their catalog of music would be great. Concert with whatever 20, 25 songs, whatever they did. I would say the Foo Fighters, which I like a fair amount of their music. I just know that Dave Grohl, who's been around forever. Just a great performer, and hearing about how he broke his leg during a concert and he got up and he kept sitting down, playing a guitar. That had to have been quite an experience. So I would say the Foo Fighters would be the second act, Led Zeppelin being the third act. And the first one that I would like to see, there's a few I'm thinking between. I'm probably thinking Michael Jackson, probably the mid 80s, maybe late 80s, Michael Jackson. I was thinking that, or maybe a little Billy Squier, who I loved some of his stuff back in the day, and I still listen to it a little bit. There's Don't Say No album from 90 or 81. Maybe I'd have Billy Squier open up for these 3. But yeah, I would say Led Zeppelin would be the third one on stage. The Foo Fighters would be the second, and the opening act after Billy Squier, the warm up, the other 2 would be, who did I just say? The brain is going. Michael Jackson.
Yes.
Hello, Michael Jackson would be because of knowing a lot of the music and having a lot of respect for his musical ability. And that's not
when
just
you were running marathon.
Go ahead.
No. When you were running marathons, did you wear headphones? Were you listening to music?
Yeah. So I ran one marathon in 2003. I'll do a lot of podcasts, even though I work out and do a little jogging now. It's kind of a lot of podcasts. Unless I'm working out, I listen to classic stuff. But yeah, music. I love having an AirPod or an earbud in my ear, and cranking some music that kind of gets me going. If it's an experience like running or working out that I want to have like a little bit of a pick me up. So yeah, I love having an earbud in my ear and listening to music for sure. And I would say you didn't ask the specific question or anything in the realm, but I've thought about it before, and I've actually gone on record to some people that know music. I've said if I could have anyone's voice or a combination, I've said Steve Perry from Journey, Geddy Lee from Rush. Was never a huge Rush fan, but I've watched a couple documentaries and have a new appreciation in the last probably 5 years for Rush and their history and all that. And then Sam Cooke, which is obviously a little bit of a break from those two, but just hearing some of the voices and the smoothness and the I'm not sure if it's range or if it's just how they sing or whatever, but Steve Perry, Geddy Lee, and Sam Cooke would be 3 voices, and maybe Karen Carpenter if I was a little higher notes would be on up there.
Yeah, that'd be a great quartet.
It would be.
Wouldn't it be something?
Let's make it a quintet. Let's get me out there, and maybe Davide can drown out my voice, but I can at least have the experience of belting out and trying to harmonize with that classic group or those classic.
Davide could mix it, make it sound good, Bob. I think you're onto something. We might
little auto tune.
You're either onto something,
whatever it needs.
No, this is the fun part of this. We could sit and talk music for a long time. Anything we've left out, you guys, that you think needs to be brought up?
No, it's been a joy. It's been great, friendship with Bob over the years, and just respect him as a great athlete and better person. And of course, respect you two as well.
Thank you.
Right. And like you Dave, you led the podcast off with pretty much everyone remembers their first concert, which is a great, when Brad mentioned your podcast, I hadn't been familiar with it. But yeah, everyone is familiar with, if they've been to a concert, and a lot of people have, with that experience and what it meant. And did they take a limo? Maybe what they wore? Being close to the band. If you're up in the rafters or whatnot, that's one thing. Sometimes with the right act and the right person, that's what it takes. But you said, like you kind of alluded to and literally mentioned, if you've experienced some of the really close stuff where you're up within, tossing a wiffle ball to the band or to the stage, it makes it so much more personal, a better experience, at least to me. And I think most people that enjoy music. I love music. I don't play an instrument. I enjoy singing. I'm not a singer, but yeah, it's just, we all have songs that kind of got us through maybe a time in our life, an episode, or that we can kind of relate back to. When you hear a song, I've got a certain song that Live Like You Were Dying. The day I found out my dad had passed away, the song had been out. And then I just I really tuned into the lyrics, and it's like, oh my gosh. It just kind of, whenever I hear that song, it gives me chills. He passed away December 2010. My dad did. And, but I always kind of relate hearing that song to the drive I made from Minneapolis up to Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, which is where he passed away at home, because they were living up there, he and my mom. And yeah, just things like that, just a little experience like that, what turns out to be quite significant. And a lot of times we can relate that to a song. And I certainly have my share of experiences with that, just like most people.
Yeah, it's a big difference maker, music. And, you mentioned the intimate theaters too, Bob, and I think about seeing a show in a theater like that. And you mentioned the Minnesota Zoo, and they brought in so many acts. I remember Boz Scaggs, notably, we went to a Boz Scaggs concert, and I knew his music. Didn't know much. I'd never seen him at a show, but at the Zoo, the guy was one of the best shows I've ever seen. Personable, the sound was great, and it's like you're in somebody's backyard on a summer night.
Exactly.
And yeah, those kind of venues. And we were at the Fitzgerald recently, saw Chris Isaac, and in that atmosphere, I mean, his show was. I talked to a couple of people that were there that didn't know him, but they'd gotten tickets from. They knew somebody in the band, and they went nuts over this. It's just great. I said, well, that setting and the mood you're in, yeah, that makes a big difference. So anyway, gosh, great having you guys here. It's always great seeing you, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I think we could go on for at least another show to say that, and hopefully at some point we will. But gosh, Bob and Brad, I really thank you for coming on in today. It's great having you on the podcast.
Dave, I really enjoyed it. This has been a great experience. I'm glad Brad was here as kind of a wingman to spin some yarns and tell stories of his own, and appreciate, Davide, your.
Thanks for coming in, and yeah, it was fun to hear about your experiences.
Great having Brad and Bob here. Bob Martin, of course, Bob, longtime Minnesota basketball player, in high school here, obviously, and then on with the Minnesota Golden Gophers and the NBA as well. Brad's been with the Minnesota Vikings for many years, and he was kind of the player's guy, man. If there's an event or a charity or something, Brad was the guy getting that done, and did a lot of great work in this community, behind the scenes with a number of charities. So appreciate what you guys have done and brought to the table. And most of all, thanks for coming in today. And our thanks to folks at Aquarius Home Services here at the AquariusHomeservices.com studio, and also our great friends at StarBank.net. So reach out. They're wonderful organizations. Davide Razzo, the pride of Basel, Switzerland. I will look forward to seeing you next week again.
See you next week, even if it's virtually.
Yeah, it's virtual, kind of weird. I'm not the one on the virtual part, but today I am. So
it's snowing here
everybody.
Now, and I'm sure it's not snowing where you are.
No, yeah, when they brought up the shark accidentally, the fisherman did. That wasn't Minnesota, so that happened the other day. I was walking the beach and guys pulling up a shark, and I had to stop and visit with him, and he wasn't intending to catch it. But yeah, that's the kind of weather we're in. But nobody wants to hear about warm weather. Yeah, so hey, thank you guys.
Mute that mic.
Yeah,
right.
I'll be back soon. So see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks,
we're
Dave.
back next week. And anywhere, Spotify, Apple, download these. Just subscribe. It's that simple, and you can hear a whole bunch of them. There's a lot of great ones out that we've had in the past. And again, another one today. And we will see you next week. And go to talknorth.com too. And there's a lot of great podcasts there. So see you next week on My First Concert.